Hi guys, Vicious Cosplay here, here with another sewing tutorial. I recently became the owner of a bunch of awesome new sewing feet after doing a lot of really random research online, and I decided after doing all of that and visiting a lot of links, I thought I would give you guys a little mini tutorial on different sewing feet, what they could do, why they're useful. Sewing feet, depending on if they come with your machine or not, can be pretty cheap to pretty expensive. A basic foot, you know, say you break your standard book, might be about $1 or so, while a more expensive foot could range you up to $30. A basic sewing foot normally goes around $10. You can get them on Amazon. It's definitely where I'd advise to go buy them. I tried to organize this list from extremely useful to cosplayers to these are really nice and helpful, but if you don't have the money to fork them out for it, that's okay. But I thought I'd at least show you the arrangement of what I have in my sewing kit. Here we go. First up is the general foot, also known as the J foot, also known as the standard foot. This is the standard foot that comes with most machines. They come in different sizes. They might have, I don't know what that thing is. They may have a flat front, they may have a clear front, but generally it's the same stuff no matter what. General feet are kind of like universal needles. They do a multitude of things. They're the jack of all trades, but they're the masters of none. They're great for most fabrics, they're great for straight stitching, they're great for satin stitching, but some things can do it more efficiently than this foot. General foot. Just good, quick, straight stitches. Makes an efficient straight stitch. That is also good for seam work. It can also do satin stitching. Or in this case, really wide zigzag stitches. Our next foot is a big foot. This one is known as the walking foot. It is an efficient device used for making straight stitching. The advantage it has is it actually has these teeth at the bottom of it that helps guide the fabric. This is great for working with slippery fabrics such as chiffon or taffeta, and also great for silks and organzas. It is a much bulkier device, so it does require you to slow down on your stitches and not rush through it like you may do with a basic foot. This foot can also get pretty loud, as you will soon realize. And then we have a rather efficient, clean, straight stitch. Easy and great. Next on our tour of feet is one of my newest additions. This is the roller foot. The point of the roller foot is for sticky fabrics such as pleather, leather, stretch vinyl, vinyl in general. Anything that generally gets stuck to metal feet, this is especially good for. The reason why it's great for this is that the entire foot is made out of a plastic, which means that the fabric will slide more easily against it. And then of course the little roller helps it guide a little bit more. Now this is a piece of two-way stretch pleather. I use this for Ming. Initially I had to top stitch some of the boots and my boot covers, which attempting to do that with this fabric with a regular foot was very difficult. I wish I had had that foot back then. Normally when you're sewing pleather, leather through a regular foot, it'll scrunch up, it'll stick, it won't glide through. And look at that, absolutely zero issue sewing through the fabric. Straight stitch, no bundles, no loops. Actually, my intention's perfect. Here we have the zipper foot, and I gotta say that this is a must-have for anybody sewing zippers and for cosplayers. This is also a great tool for sewing close to edges, because you put the needle in right here and the guideline to the edge of your fabric can be right along this edge here. It's a double-sided foot, so using the needle in the center position, you put it from edge to edge and it snaps to either side for a straight stitch. This allows you to get very close to the teeth of the zipper for an efficient seam. Always remember though that before sewing your zipper, hand basting it in is a lot easier than trying to sew over pins. And I'm going to use a very large stitch for this because I plan on ripping the zipper out. Here you can see how close the stitch ended up, close to the zipper teeth. And if I flip it over, you can see how well the seam is to the zipper. One quick swipe, and huzzah, this is a basic zipper. Although you can easily sew an invisible zipper with a normal zipper foot, the invisible zipper foot gives you the added advantage of rolling out the teeth as you sew to get a much closer seam to the edge. It guides the teeth through one of these two channels, bringing it much closer to the needle. Some people, like myself, find it more efficient to actually use a basic zipper foot, but for people first time sewing invisible zippers, this actually can be a very good buy. Always remember, basting in your zipper before sewing is a lot easier to work with. Simply get your zipper in one of the grooves and sew. As you can see, this is one of the reasons why I don't use the invisible zipper foot too much. I fudged up and I caught the teeth on this side. It gives you a very close seam, allowing the invisible zipper to have a nice close seam to the edge of the zip, as long as you don't catch the teeth while you're doing it. The monogramming foot is essentially a bigger version of the general foot. It's about 1/8 inch bigger on either side than the actual general foot. Its focal point is in the center of the foot instead of one side, and it's best used for decorative stitching such as zigzags or satin stitching. This is due to the lifted back that allows the foot to guide more easily over gathered stitches. With any decorative stitch, it is also best to use stabilizer in the back. I prefer coffee filters for stabilizer. I'm actually going to use one of my machine's decorative stitches so that you can see the way that it decorates. And the monogramming foot also holds it a little bit more firm. And there you go, a decorative zigzag stitch, in which, as I said, coffee filters is a great tearaway stabilizer. So all I'm going to do is pull it free, and look at that, you're done. The satin stitching foot is specifically designed for satin stitching, aka the tight zigzag. The raised back allows the stitches to flow efficiently through the machine, while the clear front of the foot makes it much easier to see your intended guidelines as you feed it through the machine. It's much easier to follow your trail than with a monogramming foot or the standard foot. Loose in the stitches, but still an effectively clean satin stitch. The narrow hem foot is a great way to make single line narrow rolled hems. This foot is for a 1/8 inch roll, which is super tiny and requires only one single stitch to hold it down. This foot's best uses are for lighter fabrics such as satin versus heavier fabrics like linen or heavy cottons. This is a very good foot for a clean finished edge that won't fray. And there you go. One clean, not really clean, this wasn't a straight edge, narrow hem roll. But it looks clean on that side. Yay! What is an overlock stitch? Think of serging without the cutting and bravo, you have an overlock stitch. The foot for overlocking gives your fabric a guide for setting an overlock stitch at the end of your fabric in order to finish the edge. This is great for locking inside seams or simply finishing an edge. It's mostly best for machines that actually have an overlocking setting. This was a straight stitch I did earlier, and I'm just going to overlock the edge. Okay, it wasn't the straightest edge, but right now, the inside hem has now been overlocked. So this is a nice finished edge. This can also be really nice for decorative edge stitching. Who hates to gather? Me. And I'm gonna guess you. The gathering foot feeds the fabric through the machine at a quick pace to gather it under the straight stitches. By changing the stitch sides or even pulling at the thread, you can tighten or loosen the gathers. It also allows you to sew gathers at straight fabrics with only one machine pass. For working with the gatherer foot, it's also a very good idea to set your stitch length as high as it can go to get really intense gathers. To this day and age, I have no idea how this foot works. It's magic. And holy crap, I have gathers. You can also, if you want, sew a seam fabric to the gathered fabric just under it by feeding the fabric in through this little swatch thing. Well, if you do it efficiently, which I just didn't do. But essentially, if you don't fuck it up like me, you get nice gathers underneath the fabric. Another enormous foot in our foot collection is the Ruffler Foot. This is a big piece of machinery, and it is loud, and it is chunky, and it is amazing. What this does is it actually makes ruffles and pleating, which can become very accurate to exactly what you want. You can manipulate it so that it has a measurement of how many ruffles per stitches, 1, 6, 12, or manipulate it as you wish. And you could also manipulate the depth of your stitch going from very thin to extremely deep. So from simple ruffles to very deep pleats. For this test, I'm actually going to do a deep stitch every 1 stitch. I've got the stitch pretty long though. So depending on how you adjust how you manipulate your stitches and such depends on how deep the stitches, how deep the pleats will be, how deep the ruffles will be, how far apart they'll be. There is quite a few combinations you could do with this between stitch length, depth, as well as the length of your stitches. So here we go. Which, with one quick pass, we have really deep ruffles here, which are already bound. Now another interesting thing you could do with the Ruffler Foot is that you can actually bind it to a straight stitch in one pass without needing to sew the ruffles and then sew it to the fabric. For this example, I've got 2 pieces of fabric under here. I've got a ruffle every 6 stitches, and I've loosened the depth a little bit. Now I didn't feed this properly, so this isn't absolutely perfect, but as you can see, there are the ruffles at the top. And if you open up your seam, you can see the one side with the very small ruffles and the other side with the straight seam. Want to top stitch something close to an inch? The 1/4 inch guide foot guides your fabric up to 1/4 inch to your fabric for a narrow and perfectly straight stitch. This is great for top stitching ribbons and bias tape or putting puckered seams into your fabric. For general experimentation purposes, I'm going to top stitch down this double folded bias tape that I made for, I don't remember, a long time ago. And there we go. We have one seam a 1/4 inch away from the hemline with the bias tape completely held down. The stitch in the ditch foot is a foot I wish I had when doing my Hong Kong stitch tutorial. This foot is much like a zipper foot for the exception that it puts the needle extremely close to the edge of the guide. This is amazing for doing Hong Kong stitching with bias tape, or even a way to Franken stitch 2 pieces of fabric together via satin stitching. It could also be used as a guide foot for allowing satin stitching patterns, as you could use the center guide to go right down your drawn line if you so needed to. Alright, I've got my guide placed on the edge of my ditch, and now I'm going to do a straight stitch down. Alas, it would be good if I was on the right side of the material, but at least you can see that by following the guide you can get really close to the edge of the fabric. As I said before, you could also use the guide foot in order to Franken stitch, as I call it, 2 pieces of fabric together with some satin stitching. And voila, I have successfully combined these two pieces of fabric together. The blind hem foot is a foot made for blind hems. That is a semi-invisible hem that's used on things like trousers, pants, cuffs, and other things like curtains that make a semi-rolled hem with a seam that does not show on the other side. It locks the fabric in place with a very minuscule dart that with the right color of thread will be virtually invisible on the other side. This foot works with a majority of fabrics but will require a blind stitch option on your sewing machine to use. Each blind hem foot, depending on the maker, can use a different sort of stitch type or a different fold type. Read the directions if you get a blind hem foot on how to do it properly. Because I had to read the directions to remember how to use this fucker. It's normally good to baste or prep your stuff, but there we are. We've got our stitch there. And as you can see here, you can catch the little puckers due to the purple fabric of where the hem was laid down. And of course, it's stuck. It's not going anywhere. Piping or welting feet are feet that are specifically designed in order to make and sew piping. The way it works is it essentially puts piping or anything of that sort down between your fabric. You sandwich it in between, and the needle goes right against the edge, much like a zipper foot would, in order to sew it in place. It's a little more efficient than a zipper foot or another guide foot because it actually holds the piping down with the fabric. You could sew piping with this or make piping with it. I can't do a demonstration because I don't have proper tubing to make piping and I don't have any spare piping, so here are your piping feet. I don't have any buttons, so I can't really show you how to do the next 2 feet either. This little clear guy is your button sewing foot. I think I've used this a grand total of twice in my life. The way that this foot works is it actually holds the button down to your fabric and allows your machine to go back and forth between the buttonholes. Buttons tend to have standard placement for sizing in order to use effective methods like this. Unfortunately, I don't have any buttons, so I can't show you how it works. It's pretty fucking awesome though. And last but not least, this big ass guy is a buttonhole maker. Again, I don't have any buttons, so I can't size this up properly, and I don't feel like running it through my machine. Essentially, if your machine has a buttonhole, an automatic or regular buttonhole maker, the way that you work is you place your button back here for the sizing of it, and the machine will actually guide down to the length of the button, and then come back crisscross, and come back up and seal the button. That way all you have to do is seam rip the hole open. Again, I don't have any buttons and I don't like doing it blank without something in here to hold this, so I'm not going to take any chances. And that, boys and girls, is my little mini guide to the world of, oh my god, there's all of these fucking sewing buttons. I hope that this tutorial has been very helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at contact@viciouscosplay.com. You'd also find me on my Facebook and my Tumblr. Everything can be searched as Vicious Cosplay. I hope you guys have a good night. Bye!